Hey guys, it's Miss Leone here, and today we're going to be creating a basic still life drawing using observational drawing techniques. The materials you're going to need for today are a piece of paper, a ruler, a pencil, and I have this reference image that you're going to follow along, and we're going to be enlarging it. So observational drawing techniques is a way for us to accurately draw something the way that we see it. So we're going to be looking at proportion, and proportion is how objects relate to each other in size and compare to the whole. We're going to be looking at hierarchy, meaning that objects that are closer to the viewer are lower on the paper. Okay, and if they're farther away, they're higher up on the paper. We're going to be using overlapping, which is objects that are closest to the viewer are lower, but they're also in front of objects that are behind them. And we're going to be looking at space, which is an element of art where the illusion of depth is created on a flat surface. So we're going to be looking at the positive space. The space of the actual object is the positive space. So we have 9 objects here, but we're also going to be looking at the negative space and the shape of the empty space around the object. So observational drawing technique is really important because proportion enables us how to figure out how the objects relate to each other in size and compare to the whole. We're going to line up the objects, the positive space, to see which parts line up in height and width. And to draw them accurately, we're paying attention to the shapes created by the negative space to also figure out how they relate to each other. And then finally, we're going to be paying attention to hierarchy and overlapping to make sure that the objects that are closer to you are drawn lower on the paper, but in front of the objects behind them. All right, so let's get started. So in order to do this, you're going to notice that I have this drawing and it's split into 4 quadrants. So to do that, we have to measure our paper evenly and split it into 4 quadrants just like this. And you'll see some marks that I have here that I used in class to figure out the relationships. So the idea, even if it doesn't look exactly like this, the idea is that the objects are going to be in the relatively same positioning onto the larger paper. And this is really going to help you if you are drawing a landscape or a face even, portraits, anatomy, anything that you want to recreate, you're going to be using these observational drawing skills. So the first thing we're going to do is split up the page. So with a ruler, if you don't have a ruler, I'll show you how to do that also. So this paper, this is just computer paper. This is 8.5 by 11. So that means that this is going to be at 5.5. Okay, so I can do that to the top and the bottom. And this is 8.5 this way, so that means it's going to be 4.25 in half. And I'm going to show you how to do this if you don't have a ruler. So it's going to be 8.5, that's 4.25. Okay, so I'm just going to do that on each side. So before I connect them, I'm just going to show you what to do if you do not have this size paper. So all I'm going to do, if you don't have a ruler, all I'm going to do is take a paper the same size. I'm just going to fold it in half. And this is like a very easy way to measure accuracy. Folding it in half, right? And then wherever that line falls, I know that's my measurement. And then I can do that again for this edge. All I have to do is fold it in half towards me, just making sure when you're folding it it's even, and then you're going to see that the separations match. Okay, so since I have a ruler, I'm just going to use this to connect the lines that I made. So I'm making them on both sides, that way I know that it's straight. Okay, when you're doing guidelines like this, keep in mind you should be doing them lighter for drawing purposes and me sharing with you how to do it. Mine are going to be a little darker than I normally would do it if I wasn't filming, but this is just so that way you can see it. Alright, so we have that. So we're ready to begin. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm just going to take this piece of paper, I'm just going to split it in half so we can kind of cover what we're not doing, because this is a great help. I notice it can be a little overwhelming looking at all of these objects and being like, oh no, and I have to draw them all. Where do I even begin? So we're just going to start by covering 3 of the quadrants and focusing on the lower left quadrant so it's not as intimidating. So we are just simply going to be recreating this object right here Okay, so I'm looking to see how far does this object relate to the bottom of the paper. So I would say right around here. I'm looking at that relationship. Now I have to figure out where does it fall within here. And I kind of notice it's a little centered there, right? But then like exactly how far does it go? So if I take this quadrant and I split it in half, I'm going to kind of make quarters here just to kind of help our eyes. So if I split it in half and then split those halves in half, I can see that it's pretty much centered, and I can see that this end is slightly past this first mark and this as well on the other side. So I'm going to do that here, split it in half, 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 so then I can kind of see that it's going to, the edges are going to go right around here. So I already know where my bottom's going to be. Now let's figure out how tall it's going to be. So the next thing that I'm going to figure out, I'm going to look here and I'm going to split this in half. And I'm going to see that I can see that this background, right, so this is glass so we can see it. The background of the curve is slightly lower than the half. So I already know slightly lower. It's going to go around here, okay? And then next, I'm going to figure out how high up. So I already can see that this is pretty much touching that line. So I know that that's going to go up here somewhere. So the last thing I'm going to figure out before I start is this area. How tall is this little rounded edge going to go? So again, if I split it in half and then half again, I can see that it's slightly below where that half of this is. So I'm going, it's slightly below. It's going to go about right here. Alright, so now I have my boundaries kind of marked out. So I'm going to start very lightly, very sketchy. I'm just going to push this up a little bit. And I'm just going to very lightly sketch this rounded edge first. And then once we start actually finishing it, then we can kind of make our marks a little darker. So just sketch nice and loose, because once you like whatever line you're going to use, then you can kind of thin it out a little. And then I'm going to go in, and I can see that this part of the oval is kind of coming up here. And then I can always adjust once I'm done, but we just want to get the basic object in, and then we can start playing with it. So I can already see that this looks like it's coming up slightly more. And then I just start to erase, clean up my lines, which lines I want to use. You got to decide. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a light vertical line just like I did in the other activity right before this. Okay, remember when we drew bottles from symmetry, we added a line. Just trying to round this a little. I can fix it after though. Making it nice and loose at first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just measure. This is about, okay, nice. This is about 4 inches. I'm just going to center that. Okay. So to do that, I'm kind of just, I see that it's more or less 4 inches, so I'm just going to bring the center line so it's even within, so there's an even amount of notches within. And I can see it's about going to be right here. So at this point, I'm just going to make a light vertical line going from the bottom of the oval up to the top of the quadrant, just so I can figure out the neck of the bottle better. So I'm just going to put that there. And now I'm going to start to make this top here. So they know that this is curving out. This I might have to adjust depending, but I'm just going to more or less get that in there. It's rounding. I have my little marks that I made in the beginning. So I just want to make it even on both sides. And those preliminary marks will just kind of help you estimate, because you don't want to end up drawing something and then it doesn't fit where you're trying to draw it. So that's like the worst. Okay. So I'm noticing this seems a little rounder than I have mine, so I'm just going to round it out a little. See how I was able to correct that? So if yours is too skinny, And I'll be doing a lot of corrections on this paper for you guys, because nobody does this in one shot. It takes years of practice. So I'm just going to clean that up. Okay, and now I'm looking at this relationship. I kind of want to, while I'm here, make this one back here just a little rounder. You can see proportionally it's just a little rounder. Okay, so more or less to the best of your ability, as long as it's in the area. Okay guys, you just want to, you don't want to draw everything in one little portion of the paper. You really just want it to fill in there. And every time I do this, it looks slightly different, but it still remains in the general vicinity. All right, so next I'm going to start now. I'm going to go a little backwards. I'm going to start with this up here, this oval. So I'm going to go in here. And let's see how wide actually that it goes. So I'm looking here and I'm looking at the relationship between this and this down here. So I can see that based on my what's below it, it's kind of going to go to about here and here. We just want to make it even on both sides. So this is kind of like a wider. So at first it looks a little crooked, but then I'm going to fix it. Just trying to get the general placement of it. And then I can worry about getting the shape more accurate. And then I'm going to look at it and say, is it even on both sides? I think this side needs to extend a little more. So that's the idea here. So we're just trying to get it even on both sides. So everything we've been learning all year is kind of culminating into this moment. Alright, so I think I'm going to tilt my page a little because I do draw better ovals when I angle my paper. And now I need to make this back. It's a little on the straight side, so I'm going to make this curve down a little to match the curve on the bottom of the oval, the ellipse. There we go. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're going to start to make the neck. So I'm looking here. The neck is pretty shallow. Like if I were to split this in half just to see the relationship, the neck is more in from there, so I would say maybe around here. And it's rounding. I always like to call this like the neck of the bottle. And then you just want to make it on the same distance from the middle line so it's symmetrical. And then from here I can see what do I need to do to fix this. So I'm going to go in and I see that we have this here, so I'm probably going to have to lower this a little. Or I might have to raise this up, so let's see how this works out. And this is going to come down, and this is going to come down. May not have to do too much. Like I said, as long as it's in the general vicinity, I'm happy with that. We're just enlarging right now, and I think I'm going to make this line come up a little more. It's a little too low. Okay, so I'm looking and I feel like this is a little off. So let's see, what can I do here? I'm just going to make this side just a little wider to make it match that side. So this line is really helping us to figure out, to make it symmetrical on both sides. And then I can get rid of this little line here. So I'm going to look at it. And now that I'm looking here, I feel like my neck is a little long. I do need to extend this bulge a little. So I'm just going to do one of these. And just add. There we go, and I'm just going to make it match. You can see how I'm correcting myself. I'm just going to tilt my page so I can draw it a little more accurate. Tilt it this way. So if I really need to, I can just connect this line right here. So then I can see that it's a little higher up. The relationship is more accurate. It wasn't much, but it's enough. And sometimes when you're doing observational drawing, you don't realize that something's off until you draw something else. And then you notice, like, something's off here, what do I do? And then you look back, you backtrack your steps, and then that's when you notice, well, if you started with one thing crooked, it kind of throws everything else off. And then just go in, and once you're happy with the shape, so I feel like, then you darken it, but I feel like this is probably the most difficult object to draw in this whole drawing. It's kind of setting the stage here, the first object, so rounded objects are not my favorite thing in the world to draw either. And I'm just going to make this little like legend there. I just feel like this is a little crooked still in here, so let me just... Alright. Something's still bothering me here. I think this... Oh, let's see. Maybe this has to be a little more in. So if you're just, you're just problem solving here, I think I'm going to make this side a little shorter. There we go. I think just to make that more centered. I feel like this needs to be a little rounder. Okay. Okay. And then just to finish it off, I'm just gonna, there's like some little 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, just some little kind of marks inside of there. And then here I'm just gonna add 1, 2, 1, 2, just to kind of make it look like glass texture. All right, so now we're done with that. We're ready to move on. So now I'm just gonna cover this side only, because now the second object, so you should be drawing this in the order that I am drawing it in, because we're doing the ones in the front first and building that hierarchy and overlapping. So for this object, this tall cylinder, I already know that it has to go right around here. I could just, based on looking at the negative space, I can tell. So let's see how that lines up. Yep. And then I have to figure out where does it line up in here. So I can tell it's kind of about here, right? Because I'm looking, it's right above where this little line goes. And if you really wanted to be accurate, I can split this quadrant in half, and I can see that it's actually right below, which is, yep, right around here. So I am going to draw like the whole, because this is glass and we do see it back there, and I already see where this line is going to go. I'm looking at this negative space, see how it looks like a D shape? So I do want to make that relationship here. And just by doing that, I see that I need to fix the angle of my neck so the D is a little more rounded. So this is something too that you can really figure out. If I didn't put that line there and I didn't look at the D shape, I wouldn't have really noticed as much. So I already know that's going to go there. And then behind, I'm just going to do it lightly. It's like the little, just to kind of continue the object. And that's going to help me really figure out where it's going to go in relation to this. So this is going to go back here. Okay. And then I have this edge, and I think I made it a little too wide. I'm going to just have it come to about here. I'm going to do my best to make it go straight. So the best way to do that, and I always have issues with straight lines, perfectly vertical, is just to look at the edge of the page. You don't really need a ruler. I prefer that you practice without the ruler. So I'm going to look at the edge and make it sure it's parallel as I'm going up. So I'm just going to stop here in this quadrant for now, and here. So I already know where it's going to go in relation to this object. Now I'm looking up here. How high up does it go? So if I split this quadrant in 4 up here, and then in half again, I can see that the bottom of this, the top of the cylinder, right, the oval is kind of in between more or less. So I know that I'm going to kind of stop around here, continuing that line up. Same thing here, I'm just going to make it go to the same height, just like when we did basic cylinders in our other assignments. You might have issue with this assignment if you haven't done the other ones. Okay, and then from there I'm just going to make this cylinder. I have this ellipse happening, finishing it off. So this was an easy one. We didn't need that line to help us split it in half and have symmetry, because we already did this a bunch. It's pretty simple. Some of these objects we won't be putting lines, some of them we will. So let's see. All right, oops. So now we're moving on. So you can see also the relationship here, right? So I'm just going to darken these lines so you can see them a little better. I don't know how it's showing in the camera. This is what I'm using, right? Those lines, those quadrants. So now I'm done there, and the next thing, I'm still keeping this covered actually, because we're not preoccupying ourselves with that. We're just going to stick to this little side still. So the next object I'm going to draw, it kind of looks like a tuna can, right? If we look here, okay? So I already know just the first thing that I'm automatically looking at is where does it fall in relationship. So if I go down like this from here, I can see it's a little over. So I have a feeling it's going to start right around here. But let's see. So if we split this quadrant in half again, I can see it's slightly over. So let's see that. Half again. It's slightly over. Oh, good. Yay. All right. So I know it's going to be around there. And then if I do half and half again, I can see that this is going to be falling. This top line is in between those. So this is going to be coming to about here, right? This curve of the ellipse. Then the top of it's going to go slightly past. So this is going to be a little like wider, so it's going to come around here. This is just preliminary marks, just trying to like kind of guide myself where it's going to be. Then I'm looking down here, and if I do half of this half, I can see that it's falling somewhere around here. Okay, and then I'm looking at this relationship to where it's touching. So I'm looking at the negative space, and I'm looking to see where it's lining up. So more or less I'm kind of getting it. Now I'm going to be going into this other lower quadrant, so I'm not going to focus with this on top now. Let's cover that. We're just looking at this bottom section. And how far out does it go? So if this is half and this is half of the half, so half of the half, it's before it. So I would say about here. And then I can fix that. I'm just trying to place it. Okay. And then this is going to come in here. I'm putting it behind the glass. So I kind of just want to make this side go up at the same angle. So now I just have to fix this because it's a little crooked, but that's okay because now we're going to be fixing them. I just wanted to make sure that it would fit in the right positioning, making sure it's going into the right quadrants proportionally. So I already fixed this. Now this side has to match. But see how I'm sketching really lightly? And as I'm sketching, I'm just kind of getting rid of whatever corrections I'm making so it doesn't get confusing. And then I'm going to make this back this top of this oval. This is just like a cylinder that's wide. It is a cylinder, it's just short. I just noticed. I'm gonna fix this side too. I just noticed. So sometimes, look, I wasn't even working on this side, and I just peeked over. I'm just adjusting that. Okay. And then once I do that, I'm gonna do just like if you did the bottles practice when we traced the liquid in that bottle in the third section. Just making sure that this is parallel, just kind of tracing it out. And I'm sketching lightly because I am going to be erasing part of that. Alright, so now we have 3 objects. Yay! Alright, so now we're moving on. So I'll cover this back up because we're done with that for now. Now we're going to do this big jar back here. So, where does this big jar line up? So if I'm looking at the tuna can itself, if I split it in half and I split it in half again, I notice that this jar is pretty much half of the half. So half, half again. Let's see, wait, half, half again. It's pretty much lining up right here. Okay. So now I won't look at this anymore. Now where does it line up on that side? So if I split the top of this cylinder oval in half and in half again, I can see that it's lining up with half. So half, half again. I can see that's where it's lining up. Okay, so now I already have it set up. But how high is it going to go? That's the question here. So if I split this quadrant in half and in half again, I can see that that's kind of where more or less the shoulders are going to go. It's kind of going to be like a rounded rectangle. So I'm just going to go up and let's see. It's probably going to be more or less around here-ish. Right, so half, half again. It's about here because we need to make room for the lid. So I'm making sure that this is straight. So I'm looking at the center line that I made for the grid just to make sure. Trying to keep it straight. If it's crooked, you can just adjust it. Sometimes we don't notice it's crooked until we're finished drawing it. Okay. So I'm just cleaning up some of these smudges. Okay, so this has got to be up higher, and then I'm going to go in and just kind of make this come across, and then I can start making my shoulders. Hopefully we don't have to adjust. Every time I draw, sometimes I do it perfect, sometimes I do a lot of corrections, but that's the beauty of that. That's what you should be learning here, is how to make corrections. Nobody's perfect, but if you know how to see something that's off and fix it, then I've done my job. Because that's why I love using pencils, because like I'm always making corrections. Alright, so once we do that, now we can start making our lid. But before I do that, and I'm seeing now, I think this is a little crooked. But now I'm going to actually just split this in half a little. So this right here, it's about 3.5. So 3.5 divided by 2 is 1.75-ish. Alright, so 1.75. Now if you don't have a ruler, all you have to do, I'll take this piece. All I'm going to do here is simply, I'm going to mark right here. I'm just going to actually, so I can still use this other piece to cover. So this is another little trick I have here. Instead of using a ruler, just rip it with using a scissor, you can rip it with a ruler. So I'm going to fold it on this spot, just like we did when we were measuring for the grid on the paper. So I can see that this is here. So if I fold it in half, I I can just mark where the half is. So if you don't have a ruler, you don't want to bother with the notches, this is a quick trick. So you can see here, yep, and you can see it lines up with my mark. So that's a way that if you needed to split something in half. So we're going to do this very lightly, and I'm just going to make it go to the top of the page. Very lightly, though. And try to make it as straight as you can. We don't want crooked symmetry. Okay, that's going to help me out now because the jar necks are a little tricky. Okay, so now I can see, I'm just going to kind of start like I did here a little backwards. I can see that my ellipse is going to start up here, my oval, but how far out does it go, right? So let's see, it's going to go from like here to here. So I can see, so like if I split this quadrant in half, it's kind of not fully centered. So, but if I split it in half, I can see that it's kind of going to line up, and then half again. It's kind of going to be before the half, so half, half again. It's kind of going to be around here-ish. And then that means I'm looking at this distance should match around here-ish. So let's just go for that for now. If we have to make adjustments, we can. I already see I'm going to round these shoulders a little better. I just want to make sure that this is all going to fit in here before I commit. And then it comes down. So this looks like it might be a little, I might have to raise my shoulders here. Okay. Yeah, I think I might have to. We shall see. Yes, I will. Or I can also lower this. I feel like this might be a little too steep up here. Ooh, pardon me. Maybe it was a little too close to the top of the page right there. Rounding, rounding, erasing. And here, and then here. So yeah, I'm going to just raise this. And then I'm going to raise this one. So you can see it's just minor. But you're always measuring everything against itself. So like I said, sometimes you draw and it's not exactly the way that you would have hoped and it's a little off. So I can get rid of this line now. And I'm just going to make sure that these are symmetrical before I move on. So I can see this side needs to be a little wider. And I can see that I really like how this is even on both sides. The only thing I'm not sure of is my actual shoulders of this jar. So I feel like this is actually a little narrower, so I'm going to make it go up a little more. And this one too, and just, let me just draw a light line across a little more. It's okay if you erase, like I said. I'm going to actually tilt my page this way for this angle. Okay, now at this point, there's just a couple of details on this jar I'm going to add right here. Very subtle. And then the bottom of the jar actually is right around here, so I'm looking, it kind of relates. If we see like this tuna can is here, we can see that this cylinder here, it's kind of like right in between them but slightly above the back. So right about here. Not too angled because technically it would go, it's behind it. We're only seeing this part because that's glass. If you really need to, you can draw the whole thing, but just erase slightly. Excuse me. Alright guys, and then I'm going to see that this is 1 inch. I'm going to measure half of it. And then I'm going to draw a little line, extending slightly taller than the bottle before it. So after this we only have like 3 objects left to draw. Alrighty, so then I'm just going to go here and just make this vertical line going up. Alright, so now we got to figure out the next part is this bulge here. So I'm going to look and I can see that this bulge ends slightly below where the top of that bottle is, which would be around here. So I already know that this is where my bulge is going to end. Alright, so let's try to make that symmetrical on both sides, and I can see it kind of protrudes, and I'm going to look at this negative space. So this kind of looks like a kneecap off, so it's kind of bulging where that's caving in. So I'm already seeing that. Okay. So I want to just make it even on both sides. It's always easier to do one side. It's like when you draw a face, you get that one eyeball perfect and the other eyeball is like crooked. It's like, ugh, why can't I make it match? So that's where practice makes perfect. And then this has to just kind of come down, alright? I feel like this could be a little rounder. Alright, and then next I'm going to, I can see that this is kind of fat. Right, it's a little thinner than this one, so I'm just going to kind of right about here. Right about here. And how tall is this? So this is about the height of that lid. And it has a little, making sure it's even though it's a little crooked. And then I'm going to go in and make the lid. The lid lines up kind of with that shoulder, actually. Yep. Still making sure it's even on both sides, and then it has like a little oval in here. And now I'm looking. I feel like this side is bulging too much. I'm going to fix it because now that I'm noticing it's not as symmetrical as I would like it to be. So I'm just going to shave this side. This side looked a little poofier now that I'm looking. Some of you may have noticed that already. Now it's... So I'm just trimming it. I feel like it's a little crooked here. What is going on here? Let me just fix it. So it's okay if yours is a little crooked, we fix it. That's all, no big deal. Alright, so that's not bad. Alright, so now let's move on. You can just erase this little extra line on top, but just leave your lines, again, in the objects that we drew lines in so I can see. Alright, so we're almost there, guys. Yay, 2 objects left. Alright, so we're going to do the spray paint can first, even though normally we were starting with the objects that were overlapping and in the front. The way that this spray paint can is, if you notice, the line of it is actually the halfway of this glass, so I think we're going to use that to our advantage here. So if this comes across in another work of art or something, you can feel free to do that as well. So I'm already going to just notice, where is this going? So I have half of my right half, and then half that way, I can see that's kind of in between, right? So if I have half, let me see, half and then half, which would be right there, it's kind of going to start in between those two. So I would say about here. And we're also looking at the negative space, so we want to make sure that it's, yep, that the negative space relationship is there as well. So let's say about there for now. Let's just preliminarily do this. How tall is it? It's as tall as this lid. And this is totally slanting on me, so let me just fix it straighter. Now how far is it on this side? So again, if I have my half and then my other half, I could see it slightly extends. So let's see, half, other half, slightly extends. I just want to make enough room here for my glass as well. So this is how we're going to ensure that everything fits here. So this is going to go up to the same level. This side I'm going to make lighter because it is going behind my glass. So this right now is our middle point for our glass. Now, before I start making the bottom, where does it line up? So if I split this circle oval in half, I can see it's not quite, like if this is half, it's a little slightly higher. So if this is half, it's a little slight. So it's about there, I would say. Now I made this line a little crooked again. So I think it's just the angle I'm drawing at. Demonstrating for you guys, I'm trying to keep it upright for you to see it good. But naturally, as an artist, I always turn my paper all random ways to get my achieved desired angles. But for learning purposes, I am trying to keep it straight for you guys. So I'm like contorting my hand here. Alright, so now I'm going to do this bottom one, and then we're going to figure out, so what I figured here is like this is kind of like a triangle if we really look at it. So I think by making those marks, it's going to help us to like keep within it. So I'm just going to start by having this, and I can see that this is lining up here. So I'm just going to have, I'm going to tilt it just so I can get this first curve at the right angle, and I'm not putting a line here for this one. So you can see some of the objects we put the line, some we didn't. Right? So you can use these techniques to suit your needs. That's the beauty. I'm teaching you techniques, you make them your own, and you use them as you see fit. Okay, so now I'm going to do this triangular kind of pattern. So I have two papers, so I'm going to make sure they're even. Okay. So let's see, I'm going to kind of, I feel like I'm just going to try to make the angle kind of parallel to what I see there. I mean, unless you're using like a compass, it's kind of, we're kind of eyeing it here at this point. Alright, so now I can see that this part kind of lines up around there with the jar lid. So this is a little chunky one. So I'm just going to make this parallel with this line below it. Just Drawing technique